Talia Wren stood at the center of a Soho gallery on a Wednesday afternoon and laughed, open-mouthed, easy, the laugh of someone who has absolutely no idea what is coming, and told the room full of people gathered around her, "This is where it begins. This sketch right here. This is the soul of what Oliver and I are building together." The sketch she pointed to was hand-drawn in blue ink on yellowed drafting paper. The lines were faint in places, heavy in others, margin notes crowding every edge in a handwriting so specific, so private in its shorthand, that only one person on earth could have produced it. It was a residential interior, a great room, walls of glass, a fireplace set flush to the floor, proportions that no one in 1997 had seen before, but that every designer who came after had borrowed from, sometimes without knowing where the idea first came from. The drawing belonged to Francesca Alderton. It had been made by her own hand in the winter of 1997 in a Brooklyn studio apartment she shared with 3 other people by lamplight on a card table she'd found on the sidewalk. She had been 20 years old. She had not had a single client yet. She was 49 now, and she was sitting in a conference room on Park Avenue, listening to a client describe a renovation project in Montecito, when her assistant Clara sent her a photograph with the message, "I'm sorry, Francesca, I thought you should see this," before anyone else did. Francesca set her coffee down. She excused herself for 2 minutes. She walked to the hallway and she opened the photograph and she looked at it. Really looked. The way you look at something you recognize before you can explain why, and she saw the sketch on the gallery wall and Talia Wren's hand extended toward it, and she felt something move through her chest. Not rage. Not yet. Something older. Something that had been waiting quietly for her to finally pay attention. She put the phone in her pocket. She went back into the conference room. She sat down. She said, "Tell me more about the light in the living room." And she meant it. She listened. She smiled at the right moments and asked the right questions and took notes in her small, precise handwriting that had not changed in 30 years. She was Francesca Alderton. She had restructured her firm 3 times, survived 2 recessions and 1 devastating partnership collapse, and had built Alderton Design into the most recognized name in luxury residential interiors in the country. She did not fall apart in conference rooms. She prepared, she waited. She was always 3 steps ahead. But after the client left, she sat alone at the table for exactly 4 minutes with her hands flat on the glass surface. And she breathed. Then she picked up her phone and called her attorney. Before we go any further, if you're watching right now, drop your city in the comments. I want to know how far this story travels. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button and stay with me until the very end, because what Francesca does next is something none of us will forget. Stuart Reeves had been Francesca's attorney for 19 years. He was 61, methodical, the kind of man who did not use dramatic language because the facts he dealt with were dramatic enough on their own. When she reached him at 4 in the afternoon and told him what she'd seen, he said, "Francesca, I need you to check the vault." The vault was in the back office of Alderton Design studio space on the 2nd floor. A dedicated fireproof cabinet, keypad locked that held the firm's most sensitive documents and 1 worn brown leather portfolio that Francesca had carried from Brooklyn to her first rented desk to Park Avenue over the course of 3 decades. She called it the Brooklyn Sketchbook. 47 original drawings made by hand in winter 1997, 3 of which had appeared on the cover of Architectural Digest in 2001. The rest had never been published. The book was not for sale. It was not insured because she had never been willing to think about it in those terms. Oliver had known the combination. He'd had the code for 11 years. She had given it to him herself in the 2nd year of their marriage. Because they ran the firm, trust was the only architecture that mattered between people who shared everything. She walked to the back office. She opened the vault. She stood there for 30 seconds with the door open and the empty shelf in front of her, and she felt the particular cold of a space where something irreplaceable used to be. Then she closed the vault. She called Stuart back. "Pull everything," she said. "Every account. Oliver has as access to every contract he's signed in the last 2 years, every filing under his name or any name adjacent to his. I need it by morning. How bad do you think it is? I don't know yet, she said. That's why I need you to look. Oliver came home at 7:30 looking like a mimp who had convinced himself the weather was in his favor. He was 54, silver at the temples, with the particular ease of someone who had spent decades walking into rooms where his wife's name opened the door and had mistaken that ease for his own. He loosened his tie. He poured himself a scotch. He asked how the Montecito meeting went. Francesca was at her desk in the study, reading glass of water untouched beside her. Well, she said, not looking up, I heard from Clara today. She mentioned something interesting about a gallery in Soho. The pause was exactly 3 seconds. She counted them. I don't know what you're talking about, Oliver said. She looked up then. She looked at him the way she looked at contractors who came in over budget and over schedule, with complete calm and no pretense of ambiguity. Yes, you do, she said, and then she looked back at her book. He stood there with his scotch for a long moment. She could feel him calculating. She had always been able to feel him calculating. It was one of the things she'd first admired about him. The intelligence. And now it was simply something she tracked the way you track weather. Francesca. I'm tired, she said pleasantly. I'm going to finish this chapter, and then I'm going to sleep. We can talk when I'm ready. He left the room. She listened to the door close at the end of the hall. Then she put down the book she hadn't read a single word of since he'd walked in, and she called Beatrice. Beatrice Hollander was 71 years old, had spent 40 years as one of the most sought-after interior designers in New York, and had retired for authority of someone who had seen every possible version of every possible thing this industry could do to a woman. She had been Francesca's mentor for 25 years. She answered on the first ring. I know, Beatrice said. Half the design world has already seen the gallery photos. Clara called me before she called you. She thought I should be ready. She was right. What do you need? Francesca told her. She told her about the empty vault. She told her about Stuart, who was currently working through 2 years of financial documents that she suspected would reveal something considerably worse than an affair. She told her about the Meridian Design Awards, which were in 5 days, the single most important night in the American interior design calendar, attended by every editor, every collector, every architect and developer who mattered. She told Beatrice exactly what she was thinking about doing. Beatrice was quiet the way she got when she was working through something precise. You want to do it there, Beatrice said. It was not a question. He'll bring her. Of course he will. A pause. Does Talia understand what that sketchbook actually is? She knows it's mine. She may not fully understand what it means to this industry. She will by Saturday evening. Yes, Francesca said, she will. You'll need Raphael, Beatrice said, for the gown. I called him this afternoon. He's flying in from Chicago tomorrow morning. A sound that might have been admiration. You called Raphael before you called me. I called Stuart first. Of course you did. A beat. All right, I'm in. Tell me what you need. I need the right people to know I'm attending alone. I need Oliver and Talia seated somewhere that gives every floor photographer a clear line of sight. And I need Talia to bring the sketchbook. Silence. You want her to carry it herself. Oliver told her it was a centerpiece for their new studio's aesthetic. She'll bring it because it's the most important thing in their presentation. She won't leave it home on the biggest night of their launch. And you'll take it back in front of everyone who matters. Yes, Francesca said. Beatrice exhaled slowly. I'll call the table coordinator first thing in the morning. I've known the team there for 12 years. A pause. Francesca, this is not just about the sketchbook. It wasn't a question. Beatrice had known her for 25 years. Stuart's pulling the financials, Francesca said. I don't have the full picture yet. But the outline is clear enough. How bad? I'll know by tomorrow. Then tell me everything when you do, Beatrice said. Rafael Medina arrived the next morning with 2 assistants and a garment bag and the specific energy of a designer who understood he was being invited into something that would be remembered. He spread fabric samples across the dining table and said, "Tell me what you want when they see you walk in." Francesca sat across from him. "I want Oliver to understand the full dimension of what he miscalculated." Rafael tilted his head. "And the room, your industry, what do you want them to feel?" She considered. "That I was never going anywhere," she said, "that everything that is mine has always been mine, that I simply waited until the right moment to make it visible." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached for a swatch of deep, uncompromising black. Not soft, not mournful, the kind of black that had no apology in it. He reached for a second swatch, deep ivory, with an architectural, structural weight. "The black," he said. "Column seams in ivory, something that looks like a floor plan, like the thing itself, not decoration of the thing, but the actual structure." Francesca looked at the 2 fabrics together. Something in her chest settled. "Make it," she said. Stuart arrived in person Thursday afternoon, which told her the news was serious, before he opened his briefcase. He spread the documents across the dining table and said, "The short version. Give it to me." Over 22 months, Oliver transferred approximately $7.3 million from Alderton Design's project escrow accounts into a private operating fund for a new entity registered in Delaware under the name Thorn and Gray Design. Stuart paused. "He registered your pre-marriage name as a co-founder on the filing. You signed nothing. He used your name without your knowledge or legal consent." Francesca was very still. He also made contact with 6 of Alderton Design's largest clients in the past 4 months, representing himself as transitioning to independent practice. 3 of those clients have responded favorably to his outreach. She looked at the documents. She looked at them for a long time without speaking. "Can we freeze his access to the escrow accounts? The partnership agreement gives us grounds for an emergency injunction. I can file Monday morning, and his access would be suspended within hours." "Monday morning," she said, "after the awards." Stuart nodded slowly. "The timing is yours." She was quiet. Something moved through her chest, not rage, not grief, something colder and more final, the feeling of a decision that had been made somewhere below conscious thought and was simply now being acknowledged. "Stuart." She looked at him directly. "He used my name, my maiden name, on a company I didn't know existed, built with my money using my clients, and my sketchbook as the design foundation." "Yes," he said, "that is what the documents show." She held his gaze for a moment, and then she let herself feel, for exactly as long as she allowed it, the full weight of what she was sitting across from. Not strategy, something more honest than that. "I loved him," she said, quietly, clearly. "I want to be clear that I understand that I'm not confused about it. I loved him when I married him, and I loved the version of our life I thought we were building together." A pause, "But I have learned, in this business and in this life, that the love you carry for someone does not obligate you to hand them everything you built before they arrived. And I have no intention of doing that." Stuart said nothing for a moment. Then he gathered his papers and stood. At the door he turned. "For what it's worth," he said, "I think you've always known exactly what you're worth." She didn't respond to that, but after he left, she sat alone in the quiet apartment for 3 full minutes, hands folded in her lap, and let herself feel exactly as much as she permitted herself to feel. Which was enough. And then she stood up and she went back to work. The gown arrived Friday evening. Raphael came himself. He hung it on the back of the bedroom door, and they stood and looked at it together in silence. It was architectural. There was no other word for it. The black moved like something structural. Load-bearing walls translated into fabric, columns and sightlines resolved into a silhouette. The ivory seams ran from shoulder to floor, like the lines of a hand-drawn elevation plan. It did not ask for attention. It simply occupied space the way great buildings do, undeniably, without apology. "Does it look like mine?" she asked. "It looks like you designed it," Raphael said, which is the same thing. Saturday morning she woke before 5. She made her own coffee. She stood at the window of her Fifth Avenue apartment and looked at the city below, still, mostly dark, the park a long shadow to the west. And she thought about Oliver somewhere in this city, choosing his tie, calling a car, believing that tonight was simply another industry event they would navigate with the careful distance of a couple in a marriage that had been over, long before either of them said it aloud. He did not know about Stuart's documents. He did not know about the injunction waiting to be filed Monday morning. He did not know about Raphael's gown, or the 3 days of conversations Beatrice had been conducting with the right people, or the table assignment that had been arranged for him and Talia, east wall, north corner, perfectly visible to every floor photographer working the room. He did not know any of it, and that, Francesca thought, was the most useful part. At 4:15 in the afternoon her phone rang. Number she didn't recognize. She answered. "Is this Francesca Alderton?" The voice was young, female, unsteady in the particular way of someone executing a difficult decision before her nerve gives out. Francesca went still. "Yes," she said. "Who is this?" A pause. "My name is Talia. I think you know who I am." The silence lasted 4 seconds. "I do," Francesca said. Her voice was level, completely level. "I'm not calling to apologize," Talia said, "because I don't think an apology from me means anything to you, and I don't think I've earned the right to offer one, but I need to ask you something." A breath. "The sketchbook. The brown leather portfolio Oliver gave me for the gallery. He told me you had agreed to donate it to the new studio. He said it was a parting gift, that you two had already decided to separate, and you wanted it to be used going forward." Francesca said nothing. "That's not true, is it?" Still, Francesca said nothing. "Mrs. Alderton," Talia's voice had dropped. The composure she'd been maintaining had slipped into something rawer. "I found a letter from your attorney in Oliver's bag yesterday, about the escrow accounts, about the Delaware firm." "About," she stopped. "I think I've been used, and I think that sketchbook was taken, not given." "It was taken," Francesca said. "It has belonged to me since I drew it in 1997. Oliver had no right to give it to anyone." Silence. "Then I didn't know about any of it, about the money." "I believe you," Francesca said, and she did, which was its own complicated thing. "What are you going to do tonight?" Talia asked. Francesca thought about the gown on the bedroom door, the injunction waiting in Stuart's office, Beatrice's 3 days of careful phone calls, who would be positioned near the east entrance of the Frick collection, with her recorder and her photographer, because Beatrice had made a call earlier in the week that had taken care of that particular detail. "I'm attending the Meridian Design Awards," Francesca said. "I'm accepting the Pinnacle Award the committee nominated me for in January, and I'm going to ensure that certain things become visible to the people in that room who need to see them clearly." A pause. Then Talia said, in a voice that had gone small and flat, "He doesn't actually care about me, does he? He needed a young designer to change the story about where the ideas came from." Francesca thought about that, about Oliver's intelligence, and the patience of a man who had spent 22 months preparing an exit while sleeping beside her, using her name, spending her money, and trusting that she would not look until it was too late. "I don't think Oliver cares much about anything that doesn't serve Oliver," she said, "which is ultimately his problem, and not yours." She heard something on the other end that was not quite a laugh. "Bring the sketchbook tonight," Francesca said. A sharp intake of breath. "What?" "Bring it to the awards. When the moment comes, I'll handle what comes after." A pause. "What he did to me, Talia, he did to both of us, in different ways with different tools. But he did it to both of us." A long silence, then quietly. "Okay," Francesca said. She hung up. She sat with the phone in her hands for a moment. She had not planned the call. She had not planned Talia. But she had learned over 29 years of building things from nothing that sometimes the unexpected variable is not a problem to be managed. Sometimes it is exactly the piece the plan was missing. She stood. She went to the bedroom. She put on the gown. The car arrived at the Frick Collection at 8:52, and Francesca sat in the back seat for 3 seconds of absolute stillness. The city outside the tinted window. The weight of the platinum drop earrings at her ears. Small, understated, nothing that competed with the dress, the specific cold of an October night, and everything she was about to do in it. Then she opened the door herself. She had told the driver not to come around. The cameras found her almost immediately. Not because she asked for it. She had timed her arrival deliberately, 20 minutes after the entrance rush, when the photographers were restless and looking for something worth the frame. But because when Francesca Alderton arrived, somewhere, rooms reorganized, she heard someone say her name. Then again, differently. Not a greeting, an announcement. Dana Morell was near the east entrance, exactly where Beatrice had said she would be. They made eye contact for less than 2 seconds. Francesca gave the smallest possible nod. Dana lifted her recorder. Inside, the Meridian Design Awards were at full altitude. The Frick's courtyard, transformed, every table occupied by the people who made decisions in this industry, who determined which designers received the commissions and which ones received the covers. Francesca knew this room. She had attended this event for 22 years. She knew where everyone stood in relation to everyone else, and she knew exactly what was about to change. Beatrice found her in under a minute, appearing at her elbow without ceremony, the way Beatrice always appeared, as if she had simply already been there. They arrived 40 minutes ago, Beatrice said quietly, moving alongside her so they were 2 women walking together, rather than 2 women having a conversation. There was a discussion about the table assignment. Oliver did not take it gracefully. How did he handle it? He spoke to the event coordinator in a voice that was very controlled and not at all calm. A pause. He took the table. He didn't have a choice. He and Talia are at table 19, east wall, north corner. Every photographer working the floor has a clear line of sight. Forward. I made certain of it. The sketchbook? In a canvas tote under her chair. Beatrice glanced at her. She looks like someone who made a decision this afternoon and is still deciding whether it was the right one. It was, Francesca said. She moved through the room at the pace Raphael had prescribed, unhurried, unperformative, the pace of someone for whom everything is already exactly where it needs to be. She stopped at tables she knew, spoke to people she had known for years, asked real questions and listened to the answers with the full weight of her attention, the way she always had. She was, to every external measure, simply a woman enjoying an evening among colleagues. Across the room she could feel Oliver tracking her. She did not look at him. She did not need to. At 10 o'clock, the award presentations began. The Pinnacle Award for Design Excellence was the final honor of the evening, the one that mattered. When Gerald Calder, director of the Meridian Foundation, began his approach to the podium, Francesca folded her napkin on the table and stood. She reached Gerald before he'd finished gathering his notes. I need 3 minutes, she said quietly. There's something I want to say that isn't in the prepared remarks. He looked at her. He looked at the room. He was a man who had known Alderton Design for 20 years, and he put together what he needed to put together in approximately 4 seconds. The floor is yours, he said. Take whatever time you need. When her name was called, her full name, Francesca Alderton, spoken into a room that knew exactly what those words had built, she walked to the podium at the same pace she had walked all evening. She looked out at the faces. She found Dana Morell near the north pillar. She found Beatrice, in the midnight blue she always wore to formal events, watching with the calm satisfaction of a woman who has spent 3 days building a moment and intends to enjoy every second of it. She found Oliver, at table 19, looking at her with the expression of a man who has felt the ground shift and is waiting to understand which direction he is going to fall. And she found Talia 20 feet away, and an expression that Francesca recognized. Someone who made a phone call 4 hours ago and is now understanding, fully and finally, what that phone call set in motion. I have attended the awards for 22 years, Francesca said. Her voice was even, fully present, without performance. I made my first presentation at this event when I was 27 years old, with a project I had funded by borrowing against my own apartment. I remember thinking that this room, this gathering, represented something I respected, not reputation exactly, but something more precise: accountability. The belief that what you create should be traceable to your own hand, your own mind, your own years of unwitnessed work. The room had gone completely still, not the polite quiet of an audience waiting for the next item. Something more attentive than that. "I've been thinking about accountability a great deal this week," she said, "about what it costs to look at a situation clearly and choose the truth rather than the convenient version." She paused. "Many of you have seen the Brooklyn sketchbook. Some of you have published work that references it. You know it belongs to Alderton Design. You know it belongs to me." Another pause, placed precisely where it needed to land. 3 weeks ago, it left my possession without my knowledge or consent. Not a chair scraped, not a glass set down. "I'm not here for sympathy," she said. "I have never wanted that. I'm here because this community, this room, has been part of my professional life for 30 years, and I believe the people in this room deserve to know the truth about certain things. About what Alderton Design is and what it is not. About what I have built and who I built it for." A pause. "And about the fact that I am still here. That I am standing at this podium in the same room where I showed my first project at 27, and I am not diminished, and I am not confused, and I am not going anywhere." The applause started slowly, then it was not slow at all. She stepped back from the podium. She did not look at Oliver. She was halfway back to her table when she heard it. The sound of a chair, footsteps, the particular hush that moves through a room when someone is crossing it with intention. She turned. Talia was walking toward her, straight-backed, deliberate, the walk of someone executing a decision they've already made and are not allowing themselves to reconsider. She was holding the canvas bag in both hands. In front of her, with the particular care of someone carrying something they are glad to be giving back. She stopped 2 feet from Francesca. The room was absolutely silent. "This belongs to you," Talia said. She held out the bag. "It always did, and I should have asked more questions a long time ago." Francesca looked at her for a moment. 26 years old, holding 30 years of someone else's work. Having just done something that cost her something real in front of everyone in her industry who would remember this evening. Francesca reached out and took the bag. "Thank you," she said quietly. Talia nodded once. Then she turned and walked back across the room without looking toward table 19. Francesca watched her go. There was something in the way she moved, straight, deliberate, carrying the difficulty of it correctly, that she found herself unexpectedly expecting. Then she looked at Oliver. He was looking at the space where Talia had been. His face held the expression of a man watching multiple structures collapse simultaneously. The affair, the Delaware firm, the narrative he'd been carefully building with clients and colleagues, the composure he'd worn into this building like a second tuxedo, all of it coming down at once, in front of everyone in this industry who mattered. She walked to his table. She did not hurry. "Oliver," she said, "I think you should go home tonight." He looked up at her. Something moved behind his eyes. Not quite fury, not quite despair. The specific look of a man who has been extremely careful for 22 months and has just discovered that none of it was careful enough. "We need to talk," he said. His voice was low. "Stuart's number is in your phone," she said pleasantly. "He'll be expecting a call from your attorney Monday morning. What happens after that depends on how you choose to proceed." A pause. "I'm not interested in destroying you publicly. I never was. I'm interested in what is mine. All of it. Back." He looked at her for a long moment, then he stood. He straightened his jacket. He looked around the room. She watched him read the faces, the postures, the expressions of 100 people who had watched everything that had just happened, and had already decided how they felt about it. And she watched him understand that there was nothing left to manage here. No story to shape. The story had already been told by a woman in an architectural black gown who had walked to a podium and spoken plainly about accountability and had meant every word. He left without saying anything else. The room exhaled. Beatrice was at her side within 30 seconds. "Dana's photographs are extraordinary," she said. She was positioned exactly right when Talia returned the sketchbook. The light in that corner was perfect. "I know," Francesca said. "She's filing the piece tonight, digital edition, before Monday morning." "Good, that's the sequence we need." Beatrice looked at her, the long, steady look of a woman who has known someone for 25 years and has just watched them do exactly what she always believed they were capable of. "How are you?" she asked, quietly, not as strategy. Just as Beatrice. Francesca held the canvas bag in both hands. She felt the weight of the sketchbook inside it, the particular, honest weight of a worn leather portfolio containing 47 drawings, made in winter 1997, by a 20-year-old who had nothing yet but had already decided, with absolute certainty, what she was going to build. "I'm all right," she said, and she meant it in the truest sense, the kind that doesn't require reassurance. She slept deeply that night, not the surface sleep of someone still holding tension, but real sleep, the kind the body been resolved at a level that goes below thought. She woke at 5:40 Sunday morning and lay still for a moment in the dark, aware before she was fully conscious that something had fundamentally shifted, not in the apartment, in herself. She made coffee, she sat at her desk. Dana's piece had gone live at midnight. The headline was direct and unadorned: Alderton Designs, Founding Portfolio Returned at Meridian Awards. Amid financial allegations and firm's co-director. The 7th paragraph quoted without attribution who said that Francesca Alderton had been aware of the financial irregularities for nearly 2 weeks and had taken immediate steps to protect both the firm and its clients. She read every word. It was accurate. It was the kind of journalism that doesn't need to editorialize, because the facts, laid out cleanly, do the work themselves. Her phone rang at 6:20. Oliver. She let it ring twice, then answered. "I've read the piece," he said. His voice was stripped down. The performance entirely gone. What was left was simply exposed, honest in a way she hadn't heard from him in years. "I knew what I was doing, Francesca. I want you to know that. I'm not going to tell you I didn't understand what it was. I told myself the story people tell themselves, that the marriage was already over, that I was just preparing for something inevitable. But I knew." She was quiet. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know that doesn't change what the documents show. I know it doesn't change what has to happen, but I am." "Stewart's office will contact your attorney at 9 Monday morning," she said. "The accounts are being frozen. The Delaware, filing, the trademark using my name, that will all be challenged through proper channels. If you cooperate, it will be reflected in how this is resolved." A pause. "Oliver, cooperate." A long silence, then quietly, "All right." She hung up. She sat with the phone for a moment. She thought about 20 years, the marriage she had believed in, the partnership she had built and shared, the man she had trusted with her combination, and her clients and her name. And she felt all of it completely, for exactly as long as she allowed herself to feel it. Which was enough. And then she set the phone down and looked at the Sunday morning light beginning to move across the city, outside. And she thought about what came next. Her phone buzzed. Sophie, her daughter 24, living in San Francisco. "Mom, I've been reading since 5 a.m. Are you okay? Call me." Francesca called her. "Mom." Sophie's voice had that particular quality, awake too early, working up to something important. "Tell me everything." "Everything is handled," Francesca said, "or in the process of being. Your father and I will both get through this, separately, which is as it should be." "The sketchbook," Sophie said. "It's actually back?" "It's on my desk." A breath. "Are you actually okay? Or okay the way you say when you don't want me to worry?" Francesca looked out the window. October morning light, thin and bright. The sketchbook on her desk. Worn brown leather, 47 drawings, 30 years of everything she had built with her own hands before anyone else believed she could. "I'm the best kind of okay," she said, "the kind that costs something to arrive at." A silence then. I'm booking flight for next weekend. You don't have to. I want to. A pause. I want to see the gown. The description in Dana's article is not doing it justice. Francesca almost laughed. Raphael will want to hear that. He spent 4 days on it. Tell him it was worth it. She hung up. She held the phone for a moment and felt the fullness of it. Her daughter's voice, uncomplicated, certain. The straightforward trust of someone who had never once doubted which version of her mother was the real one. Monday arrived exactly as she had prepared for it to. Stuart filed at 8. By 9, Oliver's attorney had confirmed receipt. By preliminary cooperation agreement was in place, because Oliver had apparently called his attorney at 7 that morning and said simply, "Give Francesca whatever she needs." Stuart told her this, and she sat with it for a moment, and she felt the complicated, true thing it was, and she did not pretend otherwise. Hey. Then she set it aside and went to her desk. She opened the canvas bag. She took out the Brooklyn sketchbook and set it in front of her. She opened to the first page, the great room, the glass walls, the flush fireplace, the proportions that had started everything. And she looked at it for a long time. At the blue ink, faded and honest. At the margin notes in her 20-year-old handwriting, dense and certain. At the pressure of her own hand on yellowed paper from 30 years ago, making something real when she had nothing else to build it with. She thought about the Alderton Design Foundation, the thing she had been planning quietly for 2 years, and had allowed to stall in the complication of a marriage that was ending while pretending not to. A fully independent entity. A fully independent entity focused on providing money to young designers without the money or the connections the industry ran on. The kind of institution that would have mattered to a 20-year-old in Brooklyn by lamplight on a sidewalk card table. Not yet sure if what she was building was real. It was real. It had always been real. She had simply waited as she always waited until the right moment to make it visible. She picked up her phone. She called Stuart, she said. After the injunction is settled, start drafting the foundation charter. Independent governance. Alderton name, full board. I want it filed before the end of the year. I started the framework Friday, he said. I had a feeling. She set the phone down. She looked out at the city below. October light, coming through the window, illuminating everything with the particular clarity that comes only after the season has finally turned, after the warmth is gone, and what remains is sharp and true, and exactly what it is. She had the sketchbook. She had the firm. She had the trust of 22 years of clients who had chosen her, not Oliver, not the brand, but her, the specific, irreplaceable thing she had been since she was 20 years old, drawing floor plans by lamplight because she believed, without evidence, that what she was making mattered. She had work to do. And she was, as she had always been, exactly ready to begin.